The sky above Earth was quiet and blue. When the first alien ship appeared, it came like a shadow in the clouds, slow and silent, like a beast watching from above. The humans did not see it. They were already gone, long gone. The cities were broken, the streets empty. Only silence ruled the land. High above in the ship, a team of elite soldiers waited. They were not ordinary soldiers. They were trained in every kind of war, every kind of planet. They had won battles on fire worlds, ice planets, gas moons, and dead suns. They were proud, strong, and fearless. They were the best of the Galactic Union, and they were chosen to be the first to touch Earth. The leader of the team was called Zoran. He had 8 eyes, a strong voice, and skin like steel. He looked at the planet below and smiled. He said to his team, "This is easy. The humans are weak. They ran from their own world. We just need to go down, scan, and return. Mission simple." The ship lowered through the clouds. The forest below looked green and calm. Birds flew in the air, but no humans were seen. Not one. Zoran and his team jumped out of the ship, landing softly in a wide field. Tall grass touched their feet. Trees move in the wind. All their scanners showed peace, no threats, no weapons, no heat signs. They moved forward slowly. As they reached the edge of the forest, something strange happened. The sky changed color. It went from blue to dark gray in seconds. Then a loud noise came like thunder, but there were no clouds, no rain, just the sound. Then the signal was lost. Back in space, the command center called to the team, but no voice answered, no image, no data, nothing. Zoran and his team were gone. The ship circled the planet for hours, hoping to find them, but all systems showed nothing. It was as if the team had never landed. The Galactic Union thought it was a mistake, maybe a system error, maybe the planet was more broken than they thought. So they sent a second elite unit. This team had heavier gear, better scans, and more weapons. They landed in the same spot. This time the signal lasted longer, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Then a voice screamed. The scream was loud, clear, and full of fear. It was not just pain, it was terror. Then silence again. The team was gone. The ship returned with no one inside, only the pilot AI, and it was badly damaged with burn marks that looked ancient. Now the Union leaders began to worry. This was not normal. No human technology could do this. No human force could wipe out elite units in minutes. They sent probes, drones, satellites. They saw nothing. They heard nothing. The planet was too quiet, too calm. Some said Earth was cursed. Some said it was haunted. Some said something else was living down there. Something not human, not alien, something old. Still, the Union needed to know. So they sent a third elite team, the best one, the Shadow Fangs. These were killers, go silent and strong. They landed far from the first sight, deep in the desert. They moved in silence, each step careful, each breath slow. They found signs of battle, metal broken, weapons, strange marks on the sand, but no bodies, no blood, no machines, nothing living or dead, just dust and silence. Then one of them saw it, a black shape moving under the ground, fast, very fast. It came up from the sand like a snake and swallowed him whole. Before he could scream, the team tried to run, but more shadows came from all sides like the earth itself was alive and angry. They fought with fire and lasers and bombs, but the sand ate them all one by one. Their last message was short. It said, "Not human, not safe, do not come." The Union now had a real problem. They had lost 3 elite units, and the planet was still silent. No one knew what was happening. The leaders argued. Some wanted to destroy Earth with fire. Some wanted to send more troops. Some said they should leave it alone forever. But one commander stood up. His name was Varn. He had fought in the Black Sun War, and he was not afraid. He said, "They're just humans, or whatever is left of them. We are the Union. We do not run, we conquer." So they sent another team, stronger, faster, smarter, the best of the best, 12 elite soldiers with plasma swords, drones, AI packs, and skin armor. They landed with force shaking the ground. They moved like a storm, ready to crush anything in their path. But in the dark forest, something watched them, something very old, very smart, very silent. It did not move, it did not speak, it only waited. Because Earth remembers. Earth is not dead. Earth is not weak. Earth is not alone. The ground under their boots felt soft and strange, like it was breathing, like something alive was just beneath the surface, waiting for a sign to rise and devour them. All the 12 elite soldiers move in a line, weapons ready, armor shining under the gray sky, eyes wide, ears open, hearts pounding with silent fear. No one spoke, not even a whisper, because even the wind had stopped, as if afraid to wake the thing below. The trees stood tall around them like old watchers twisted with age and time, their branches stretching like fingers, their bark covered in strange symbols like writing like warnings. But no one could read them because they were not made by humans and not made by aliens either. They were carved by something else, something forgotten. The leader of the team was Captain Ryan, his face sharp, his eyes hard, his mind focused. He had seen war on poison worlds, fought monsters in black oceans, but Earth felt different, not like a planet, but like a trap, and he knew it in his bones. Still, he moved forward, because orders were orders and pride was louder than fear. Beside him walked Jera, the tech specialist, scanning every leaf, every movement, every sound, but her tools were blind, her signals jammed, her map glitched like something was playing with them, like a hand was reaching into the wires and twisting them from inside. She looked up once and saw a bird, but it was not flying, it was hanging in the air still and frozen like time itself had paused. They reached an old human city, broken, full of dust cars, rusted windows, shattered signs, swinging in silence. But no bodies, no bones, no smell of death, only emptiness, like the people had vanished in one breath, and the world had forgotten their names. Captain Ryan raised his hand, and the team spread out, scanning the buildings, checking every corner, watching the shadows. Inside one building, they found something strange, not a weapon, not a trap, but a wall full of drawings made in blood, not old, not dry, but fresh, like someone had just finished them. They showed tall black shapes with no eyes, no faces, no mouths, just standing, watching, reaching, and in the middle of the wall was a message written in big, shaking letters. It said, "They are under us." Before anyone could speak, the ground shook, not like an earthquake, but like a breath, like something had just woken up deep under the floor. The team stepped back, weapons and lights on, but there was nothing, only dust falling from the ceiling and the sound of the wind returning. But the wind was not cold, it was warm, like breath, like whisper. Suddenly one soldier screamed. His name was Leko, and he was strong, fast, brave, but now he was pointing at his legs, screaming, "Something's got me, something's pulling me down." The others ran to help, but his body was already halfway into the floor, like the soil had turned to water and was swallowing him. His eyes were wide, his mouth open, but no voice came, just fear. Then he was gone, no sound, no trace, only a hole in the ground, closing like a mouth, and the soil looked smooth again, like nothing had happened. The team froze, not knowing what to do, fear creeping into their minds. Captain Ryan shouted for him, "Circle, weapons up, eyes down, no one moves alone." Jera tried to scan the area, but her device sparked and burned in her hands. The air smelled like metal and fire and silence, the kind of silence that screams louder than any war. The ground began to move again, small ripples like something was crawling just beneath their feet. Another soldier fell, then another. No time to save, no time to scream. One by one, they were pulled into the earth by hands made of shadows, by voices made of silence, by something that hated light, hated sound, hated life. Only three remained: Captain Ryan, Jera, and a medic named Solon. They ran in the nearest building, locked the door, but they knew it would not save them. Inside, they found an old human radio, broken, but humming with a sound, not voice, not music, just a deep, low hum, like a warning, like a chant, like the last breath of a dying world. Captain Ryan touched it, and his hand burned with a mark shaped like an eye, wide and watching, always watching. Jera said, "We are not fighting an enemy. We are inside. We're walking inside its body, and it is waking up, because we step where we should not have." Solon looked at the wall and saw it moving, slowly breathing, and he whispered, "This planet is not dead, it is dreaming." Outside, the sky turned red, the clouds spun fast, the ground cracked with long veins of black light, and the trees began to move, not with the wind, but with purpose, like they were walking, like they had eyes, like they were part of something bigger, something angry. The door shook, the floor cracked, the hum grew louder, and the three knew it was the end, not just for them, but for every voice that dared step on Earth, because this was no longer a planet. It was a memory of pain, a ghost made of soil and roots and hate. And it remembered everything. Captain Ryan opened his eyes to find nothing but red light flooding the room. The ceiling above him had cracked, and roots were pushing through, thick and wet, and moving slowly like snakes looking for warmth or blood. The air was heavy like smoke, but there was no fire, only a strange scent like metal and old rain mixed with fear. Jera was crouched near the window, eyes wide and full of questions. She was whispering numbers over and over, not codes, not data, just numbers, like she was trying to hold on to something real, something that still made sense while the world outside fell apart. the medic Solon sat against the wall, pressing his hand against his chest, blood leaking through his fingers from a cut that was not there, a wound that appeared without cause. They had no time left, no plan, no help from above. They were forgotten, or maybe the ones above already knew. Maybe that was why no one ever came back. Maybe this was not a mission, but an offering, a sacrifice made in silence. Captain Rhine stood slowly, every muscle aching, every breath heavy. He looked at Jera and Solon, his voice calm, but sharp. We move now, or we die here, and not fast. Either not clean, we die inside this thing, piece by piece, swallowed like the others. Jera nodded, but her hands were shaking. She showed him a small screen, cracked, and blinking it showed their location, but it had changed. The terrain was no longer the same. The city was moving, shifting like a living maze, and the map was trying to keep up, but failing badly. They left the building together, moving like shadows through the silent city. The streets were cracked, the signs twisted, the cars turned to stone or ash, and above them the sky was no longer a sky. It was an eye, wide and red, and pulsing slowly, as if watching, as if judging. Then they reached the edge of the city and saw the forest, not the same forest from before now. It was taller, darker, breathing. Leaves moved without wind, and the trees leaned toward them like curious beasts, like hunters tasting the air. The forest wanted them, and it did not hide that hunger. Solon hesitated. He pointed to the edge where strange figures stood, tall and thin, and still not made of flesh, not made of metal. They were like shadows, made solid, staring with no faces and no eyes. And yet they saw everything, the same shapes from the bloody drawings, the same ones from the warnings, the same ones that erased the 12. Captain Rhine whispered, "Move through fast. Do not stop. Do not look back. Do not think. Just move. Because if we stop, we become part of it. And I refuse to die here, unknown, forgotten, a name scratched for memory." They entered the forest, and at once the air changed, thicker, now full of whispers, like voices crawling through their ears, speaking no language, and yet understood. Every sound made their skin crawl. Every step felt like it echoed in the bones of the world. Jera touched a tree and cried out, her hand burning like fire. But no mark left behind. The tree had shown her something, a vision, a city above the stars, gone dark, a fleet turned to dust, a message sent, but never answered. Earth was not sleeping, it was eating, and the universe had begun to fear. They moved again, faster, now heartbeats like thunder, breath, short eyes, wide. The path twisted and turned, always different, always new. The forest was changing around them, guiding them or trapping them. They could not tell, but they kept walking because stopping meant death. Then the ground split, and Solon fell. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the soil. Rhine and Jera tried to reach, but his body sank fast like before, only this time something pulled him up again. Not whole, not right. His skin pale, his eyes black. He smiled, but not with his mouth, with something else. He spoke with no sound, only thoughts pushing into their heads, saying, "This is not your world. This is the womb. This is where life ends and becomes memory. This is the place of unmaking, and you are already forgotten." Captain Rhine raised his weapon, but his arms shook, his soul trembled. This was not war. This was rebirth through terror. This was being rewritten by the will of something older than time. Jera grabbed his hand and pulled him away, and they ran deeper into the trees, deeper into the mind of the planet, deeper into the place where stars come to die and silence is a god. Behind them, Solon watched with black eyes, and he whispered without breath, "You were never meant to return." They ran until the trees parted, revealing a cliff above a sea, not water, but liquid black, like oil, like space, like thought itself. And floating above, it was a city not made of stone or light, but of bone and scream and dream. It pulsed like a heart, and above it hung the sky, not red now, but full of eyes, blinking slow, blinking deep, watching the last two. Jera dropped to her knees, not in fear, but in awe. This is the source. She whispered, "This is where it all began, where the first lie was spoken and the first truth buried." Captain Rhine looked at her, looked at the sea, looked at the sky, and he knew they were not meant to survive, only to witness. And Earth would remember them, not as enemies, not as heroes, but as echoes lost in the soil. Captain Rhine stood at the edge of the cliff with his boots sinking into the dark soil, his breath heavy and slow, his eyes fixed on the sea below. The liquid moved like thought, not like water, slow and wide, and endless. It stretched beyond sight, reflecting nothing, absorbing everything, a sea that swallowed time and memory. Jera sat beside him, her eyes locked on the floating city above the sea, its shape changing with each blink, bones turning to towers, screams melting into bridges, dreams dripping like rain into the black ocean below. Every part of it was alive yet silent, as if it waited for something, as if it remembered something lost long ago. She whispered softly, this place was made before stars, before sound, maybe even before fear. It is not just Earth, it is something pretending to be Earth, something wearing its skin. Ryan did not answer because words had begun to feel wrong here. Each word felt like a lie, each sound like a crack in a mind. He stared at the city and felt a pressure in his chest, a slow twist like a memory. He never had something pulling at the edge of his thoughts, trying to crawl in. Behind them, the forest had closed the trees, now fused together, bark like faces, roots like arms. They could not go back, they could only go forward into the black, into the whisper. They climbed down the rocky path, leading toward the sea, the ground soft and warm like breath, the sky above pulsing with invisible waves, colors bleeding into one another, as if the air itself had forgotten what color was supposed to be. As they neared the water, Ryan stopped and looked down at his reflection. There was none, no face, no shape, only a ripple. And in the ripple, he saw flashes not of his life, but of others, soldiers, doctors, children, screaming hands reaching light, fading, not deaths, not memories, but warnings, echoes of every elite unit before him, swallowed one by one, until only silence remained. Jera stepped closer and reached out her hand, touched the black surface, and it responded not with splash, but with song, a low hum deep and cold that passed through their bones and made their eyes water. The hum carried voices, not words, not cries, just the feeling of being watched, being judged, being tested. A bridge formed before them, made of bone and fire and breath, stretching from the shore to the floating city. It did not shake, it did not bend, it simply waited like the city, like the sea, like the sky above. They walked together across the bridge, the sea below, whispering louder, now not to their ears, but to their hearts, planting seeds of fear and doubt, memories that were not theirs, thoughts that did not belong to them. Jera whispered, I see her, a woman in white, her eyes endless. She stands inside the city waiting for us. She has seen all of them, every unit, every name. She never forgets. Ryan felt it too, something ahead, something not human, not evil either, just old and cold. And watching the city was not a trap. It was a temple, a place of judgment, a machine that ran on souls and secrets. As they reached the center of the city, the air changed. It became still too. Still, no sound, no wind, no pulse, only stillness, like the space between two thoughts, between two breaths, like standing inside the eye of the storm. Then she appeared, not walking, not floating, simply there. The woman Jera spoke of her face, neither kind nor cruel, her body wrapped in layers of light that flickered like dying stars, her voice not spoken, but placed inside their minds. You are the last, and you have reached the truth. She showed them images not with light, but with emotion, pain, endless pain, cities, falling planets, screaming stars going out, all tied to Earth, all traced back to this place, this sea, this temple. Earth was not home. Earth was the wound. Earth was a scar left when something too large to die was buried beneath the surface. Every unit was sent not to win, not to survive, but to feed the machine, to test if humans could break the pattern, if any would turn back, if any would refuse the call. None did. All walked forward, all were erased, made part of the memory, made part of the system. You are the last, she whispered, and you have a choice, not a path, not a door, but a moment. Accept the truth, or become it, carry the memory, or become memory, leave with pain, or stay with peace. Ryan looked at Jera, her face pale, her eyes wide, and he knew she wanted to stay, not because of peace, but because of the weight, because leaving meant remembering everything and forgetting nothing, because truth was heavier than death. He touched her shoulder and said, we walk back not for us, but for them, for the ones who still believe in stars, for the ones who wait for us to return, for the ones who still hope. The woman did not stop them. The bridge behind them appeared again, the sea below, silent, the sky above dim, the city behind fading like a dream, trying to forget them, but unable to fully erase their choice. They walked back slowly, each step carving pain into their minds, each breath heavier than the last, the sea whispering behind them, not with hunger now, but with regret, the first regret it had ever felt. They reached the shore and collapsed, the forest parting for them, the wind returning, the silence broken. And far above, in a place beyond light, a signal blinked, once a signal not of success, but of survival, not of victory, but a voice saying we remember. Ryan opened his eyes to a sky that no longer pulsed with unnatural colors. Clouds hung still like frozen breath, above him the air dry and full of quiet. The black sea now distant behind him, a dream slipping away, but never gone. His hand shook not from fear, but from memory, each finger holding pieces of what he had seen, what he had felt, what no soldier before him ever lived to tell. Jera lay beside him, her eyes open, but lost, her voice gone, her soul heavy, her body. Still she blinked once, then again, and sat up slowly, her skin pale, her heartbeat soft like the echo of a drum too far to reach. She looked at Ryan, and for the first time in days, no words passed between them, only knowing, only wait. They stood together on soil that remembered pain. Grass no longer grew here, flowers never bloomed. But the wind had returned, gentle, honest, real. It brushed past them like a mother pulling her child away from danger, whispering, not yet, not now, live first, then return if you must. They walked toward the horizon, where the trees no longer moved, and the sun remained low, as if waiting for them to pass a sky that mourned not for the dead, but for the ones who carried the dead with them. The ones who became living graves, full of stories, full of screams, full of truth too sharp to speak. Each step forward made their legs heavy, their feet unsure, as if the earth itself tried to hold them back, not to trap them, but to protect them, as if the land feared what they might bring, what might follow, what might awaken when they finally reached others. Rye knew the silence was not safety. He knew the woman in light had allowed them to leave, not because they won, but because they chose, and that choice made them dangerous, not to her, not to the sea, but to the ones who sent them to earth, the ones who sat far above, believing no one ever came back, believing the black sea erased all that entered. But he had returned, and he remembered everything. Days passed, maybe weeks. The forest opened to plains, the plains to broken roads, machines buried in dust, cities half eaten by a time, no signs of people, no sound of life, only the feeling of watching eyes deep inside, forgotten places, shadows that waited to see if he would speak, if he would cry, if he would scream. Jera, still silent, held onto a journal, a small book given to her by a soldier long gone, pages empty, ink dry. But still she carried it, and one day she wrote not with words, but with drawings, circles, lines, stars, a shape that looked like the woman in lightest city above water, a bridge made of bones, a sea without reflection. They reached the remains of an outpost, one still blinking with weak power screens, cracked floors cracked, but lights, still blinking signals, still reaching the void, calling home, calling command, calling the ones who never listened. Ryan activated the main console, his fingers trembling not from weakness, but from memory data, poured out mission logs, voice, clips, maps, lists of lost units, all marked as missing, none confirmed dead, none confirmed alive, all forgotten, all erased, as if never sent at all. He added his own report, no voice, just text, no name, just unit ID, no fear, just fact. He wrote that Earth was not Earth, that the sea was not water, that the city was not built but born, that the woman was not a guardian, but a judge, that every elite team was tested not for survival, but for choice, and all had failed until now. He ended the message with 3 words: we came back. Jera added a drawing to the file, a symbol not known to any code, not tied to any flag, something ancient, something remembered, something older than war, older than death, something the woman in light might understand. They sent the file into space, not for help, not for rescue, but for warning, for truth, for challenge, to see who would answer, to see who would dare follow and make the same choice, or fall like the rest. And far above, in a station made of metal, and Lie's generals watched the screen blink, once, twice, then freeze. The signal burned through their systems, filled their rooms with static, filled their ears with whispers, filled their minds with the sound of the sea. They stared in silence, unable to speak, unable to deny, unable to erase the truth, now alive the truth, now walking the truth, now breathing the truth, now ready. Ryan and Jera stood outside, under the quiet sun, their shadows along their backs straight. They knew they had not escaped, they had changed, and change does not end, it spreads, it waits, it calls. The Black Sea was not behind them, it lived within them, and it waited for their return. But first they would speak, first they would warn, first they would plant seeds in minds not yet broken, not yet sent to earth, not yet erased. And then when the stars grew cold and the silence returned and the signal blinked again, they would walk back not because they had to, but because they chose to again. Ryan stood at the edge of the canyon where the wind cried like a lost child carrying dust and memory across the empty miles. The sky above looked like metal beaten by time, with cracks of red sunlight breaking through the cold gray clouds. Jera stood beside him, her hair tangled by wind, her eyes sharp and deep like rivers carved by years of silence. They had walked for what felt like lifetimes, but each step pulled them closer to the Black Sea. The message they had sent still echoed through space, bouncing off old satellites, sliding into frequencies no one used anymore, crawling into the systems of stations that had not been touched in decades. And yet someone listened, someone always did. A ship came down not from Earth, not from the stars, but from a place in between, a quiet zone, where shadows moved and signals vanished. The ship landed without sound, without warning, the metal hull scratched with marks no one could read, symbols of a forgotten tongue lost long before Earth ever knew war from above. The doors opened slowly, and from within stepped three figures, tall, thin, wrapped in armor, not made of steel, but something darker, something that moved like smoke and stone, their faces hidden behind masks, with no eyes, no mouth, no life. And yet they breathed, they watched, they knew. Ryan did not speak, Jera did not blink. They waited as the figures approached, not with weapons, not with words, but with presence heavy like gravity, sharp like regret. The leader stepped forward and held out a hand covered in lines that glowed like veins of fire, pulsing not with heat, but with memory. "You have returned," said a voice, not with lips, but in thought. It echoed through bone and blood, through the quiet places inside the soul, not as question, but as fact. Ryan nodded, and the figure tilted its head, as if remembering something lost, something once buried, now rising again. "The sea still waits," said the voice. "The test is not over, the path is not closed, the truth must walk again." Jera stepped forward, her fingers holding the old journal, the pages filled with drawings, with symbols, with stories that no one outside the sea could ever understand. She offered it, and the figure took it gently with hands too large, too soft for war. The journal glowed, and the figure read, not the words, but the weight of them, the feeling behind each line, each image, each scar left by memory and choice and pain. "The time has come," said the voice. "The circle must close, the tide must rise, and the gate must open." Ryan and Jera climbed aboard the ship, and it lifted into the sky with no sound, with no flame, only light, pure and still, as if the air itself parted in silence to allow passage back to the Black Sea. The stars above spun slowly, and then stopped. The clouds below faded, and then vanished. The earth fell away, until only the sea remained, dark, endless, quiet, and waiting. The city above the sea still floated, towers made of glass and shadow lights, blinking like tired eyes, watching like sentinels of a dream that never ended. Bridges stretched from sky to sky, from thought to thought, from soul to soul, and Ryan knew they were not alone. As they stepped off the ship, the sea began to shift, not in anger, not in welcome, but in recognition, as if the water itself remembered the taste of their fear, the shape of their choice, the mark of their defiance. The woman of light appeared, not on the ground, not in the sky, but in every reflection, in every wave, in every flicker of motion across the surface. She smiled, not with kindness, not with cruelty, but with understanding, a judge who had waited for the verdict to return in flesh and spirit. "You came back," she said, her voice like wind over fire, like ice under skin, her eyes holding galaxies. "In graves you carry the memory, you carry the wound, you carry the seed, and now it must grow." Jera stepped forward, holding her own breath, steady, her hands at her side, her soul open and raw. She asked, not with voice, but with presence, "What now? What next? What truth lies behind the final gate?" The woman raised her arm and pointed, not to the city, not to the sky, but to the deep, to the darkest part of the sea, where no light moved and no sound escaped. "There lies the end and the beginning," said the voice, "the place where all things fall and rise, where fear becomes form, where choice becomes creation." Ryan followed without question, Jera beside him, the water parting not like ocean, but like memory, like dream. They sank without drowning, breathe, without air, saw, without light, felt, without touch, and deep below they found it. A chamber made not of stone or steel, but of echoes and thought, every wall pulsed with visions from the past, from futures that never happened, from timelines that died in silence. Each image a mirror, each sound a truth, each moment a question. They stood in the center, and the woman appeared again, no longer of light, but of many forms, old, young, broken, whole, human, alien, machine, myth. She was all and none, and she spoke. Every soldier sent here was tested, but not for strength, not for skill, not for loyalty, but for choice, and you chose not to fight, not to flee, but to understand, and because of that the gate can now open. She reached toward Ryan and placed her hand on his chest, and suddenly he saw it all. The first team erased not by force, but by fear, the second by pride, the third by rage, each one failing, because they refused to see the scene not as enemy, but as mirror. Jera saw it too, her mind filled with voices, not screaming, but whispering, not lost, but guiding. She felt the story of every unit, every decision, every failure, and she wept not for them, but with them. The chamber cracked, then split, then opened, revealing a light that was not light, a sound that was not sound, and within it a path, a door, a truth. You may return, said the woman, but not as soldiers, not as messengers, not as victims, but as seeds. The world must grow from what you carry. The earth must face its reflection and choose again. Ryan and Jera held hands as they walked through the light, and behind them the sea closed, and the city vanished, and the silence returned. But far above, in orbiting stations and hidden bases, lights flickered, screens blinked, alarms echoed, for something had changed. The signal sent before now returned, not as data, but as echo, not as warning, but as invitation. They came back, said a voice in the dark, and now everything must begin again. In the silent sky above Earth, 1,000 satellites shifted ever so slightly, their sensors triggered not by movement, not by sound, but by a frequency older than war, older than fear, older than human memory. The signal had returned not as a cry, not as a call, but as a pulse, slow, steady, alive. Far below, in the city once known as New Berlin, a boy named Keo stood on the rooftop of a crumbling tower, his eyes fixed on the northern sky, where clouds shimmered like broken glass, and birds flew in strange patterns. He felt it in his bones, in his blood, in the parts of his heart that still dared to dream. He was only 16, and yet the world had already taught him to expect silence, to survive on crumbs, to walk with eyes down, and hope buried deep beneath the weight of survival. But today something in the air felt different. The dust didn't sting, the wind didn't bite, the sky didn't hate. From the ruins came others, drawn by the strange rhythm that pulsed through the streets, not through devices, not through speakers, but through metal and stone and skin. The elders spoke of the old war, the one that ended in shadow, the one that began when soldiers vanished into a sea that wasn't water. Keo's sister Mira came running, her voice cracked, her hand shaking, but her eyes bright with something fierce. The same signal, she said, the exact same one. They found it again, and it's not just here. Every outpost, every relic, every scrap of the old world is lighting up. He followed her into the lower chambers, where old machines slept beneath dust and rust, where wires curled like veins through bone. The lights blinked for the first time in decades. Screens flickered awake, showing maps, shifting data symbols that no one had seen since the war, since the last mission to the Black Sea. In orbit aboard Station Echo 9, Commander Lisa stared at the glowing interface, her mouth dry, her hands cold. She remembered the briefing, the warnings, the prophecy disguised as science. If the signal returns, then the sea has spoken, and if the sea has spoken, then nothing remains the same. Her crew moved without needing orders, each one raised on the myth, each one taught that the signal would either save them or swallow them whole. She opened the main channel and sent a single phrase across all networks, across all frequencies, across every remnant of human communication: it is real. In the old vaults of Mars Base Theta, the signal awakened things, long-buried minds trapped in simulation memory loops broken by time and dust. Within seconds, the AIs activated the deep codes, the final protocol: prepare the ark, prepare the path, prepare the species for return. Back on Earth, the leaders of the free zones gathered in silence, none of them elected, all of them chosen by chaos and survival. They stood around an ancient table built from the wreckage of cities and debated not war, not power, but meaning. What does it want? What does it mean? What comes next? No one had answers, only memories, only warnings, only dreams carved into the walls of bunkers and the pages of lost books. The Black Sea was not a place, it was a door, and it had opened again. Keo and Mira moved with the others toward the coast where the ocean had once been blue. Now it shimmered with streaks of silver and black. The horizon pulsed with a glow like breath. The air buzzed like 1,000 wires singing the same note over and over. The water parted without touch, without command, revealing a path made of light, not hard, not soft, not cold, not warm, just there, solid enough to walk on, fluid enough to shift with each step. From the sky descended another ship different from the one before, sleek, smooth, curved like the wing of a bird, wrapped in symbols that danced like flame. The people stood still, their fear, crushed by wonder, their doubts, drowned in silence. The ship opened, and from it stepped Rhine and Jera, no longer dressed as soldiers, no longer marked by rank or mission. They wore robes made from light and shadow. Their eyes held the weight of everything and the promise of something more. They spoke not with words, but with presence, with memory. They showed what they had seen, what they had become, what they now carried, not a weapon, not a cure, but a seed of truth, a story that had waited to be told. The Black Sea is not a punishment, it is not a grave, it is not an enemy. It is a mirror, said the voice that filled every ear, every heart, every soul. It shows us what we fear, it tests what we love, it reveals what we are. The path they had walked, the chamber, they had entered, the woman of many forms, the gate that opened into light. It had all been real, and yet more than real, it had been choice and chance and change. Now the world had to walk that path. Now everyone had to choose to step into the sea, to face the mirror, to meet themselves and decide what to become. The sea pulsed once more, and the city of light rose again, this time not just for one team, not just for one trial, but for all, for every person, every species, every dream buried under dust and silence. People came from every land, from every ruin, from every corner of what remained. They walked the path one by one, two by two, hearts full of questions, hands empty of weapons, eyes wide open. Each saw something different. Some saw loved ones lost, some saw futures denied, some saw monsters made of memory and metal, and some saw themselves alone, unarmed, unchanged. But those who did not run, those who did not fight, those who chose to feel, saw the chamber, saw the gate, saw the woman, and heard her final words. You are not what you destroy, you are what you choose, and the sea remembers every choice. Keo stood before the mirror and saw the boy. He could become not the one the world forced him to be, but the one he dared to imagine, strong, not with fists, but with truth, brave, not in battle, but in hope, whole, not because he had never broken, but because he had chosen to heal. He stepped forward, and the mirror rippled, and the sea accepted, and behind him the world began to shift. Towers rose not from steel, but from unity. Bridges formed not from stone, but from trust, and in the sky ships danced not for war, but for wonder. The signal that changed everything was never a weapon. It was a question, and Earth had finally answered. And far across the stars, in the quiet corners of forgotten galaxies, others heard the reply, and they turned their eyes toward the sea, not in fear, not in greed, but in awe. Because the story had begun again, not with fire, not with silence, but with a single step into reflection. And the sea smiled.